Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming on this Monday afternoon. We really appreciate you being a part of this really important conversation. My name is Petra Sultan. I'm the Senior Director of Programs for Thrive Alliance, the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County.
And I am Heather Cleary, CEO of Peninsula Family Service. We are starting today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that our office and services operate on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribes past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout generations. As organizations that are dedicated to advancing equity, practicing empathy, and understanding each other's differences, we aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all connected to this land. We also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples, and we gratefully recognize our history. Also, we are recording this session today to share with those who are registered and were unable to make it live. We have Spanish interpretation available. Everyone must select the language they wish to hear the rest of the event in. Please locate the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and click on it. There you can select either English or Spanish.
A la derecha, para seleccionar en español, por favor seleccione el icono de globo que está en la parte baja de su pantalla. Al darle el clic, tendrás las opciones de inglés o español. Por favor, selecciona español.
Thank you, and we will make the recording available both in English and in Spanish. So on behalf of Thrive Alliance and Peninsula Family Service, we want to offer you a warm welcome. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Silicon Valley Community Foundation and the Grove Foundation, for their support of this series on policing in San Mateo County. We're also grateful to Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center for their thought partnership. I'd like to briefly introduce Thrive Alliance for those of you who may not know us. We're a robust, trusted network of more than 200 nonprofit organizations, government entities, foundations, businesses, and community leaders with a shared commitment to strengthening the nonprofit sector, thereby improving the lives of people in San Mateo County. We strengthen people, strengthen organizations, and strengthen communities through policy and advocacy, cross-sector convenings, and nonprofit capacity building. Thrive is a membership-based organization, and you can find out more about membership on our webpage. We welcome you to become a member and to subscribe to our newsletters so you can find out about more events such as this one. The national conversation has been taking place about the relationship between law enforcement and historically marginalized communities. It is unrealistic to think that San Mateo County would be exempt from social influences driving these issues. Thrive Alliance is a trusted network that seeks to create communication and collaboration between nonprofit organizations, the government, and the private sector in San Mateo County, and has a deep interest in the relationship between law enforcement and the communities that Thrive's members represent.
Peninsula Family Service is a 72-year-old local nonprofit providing tools and support to over 12,000 community members a year. We have a variety of programs to meet people where they are in life. We serve pregnant moms, children, adults, and older adults with care and education, transportation, employment, technology, financial empowerment, mental health, and more. Many of those we serve are houseless, have experienced violence, and do not have secure, stable employment. Today's event is the 8th in our Thought Leader series, where we gather local experts who are our colleagues and partners in making our community a better place for all. I'm proud to be here today among our community members to continue the conversation on an issue of critical importance, public safety. One of the questions I have received is, why Peninsula Family Service? How does continuing the work around community law enforcement relate to our mission of providing tools and support so children, families, and older adults can realize their full potential and lead healthy, stable lives? In my role as CEO, I see the need for effective law enforcement. However, I've also seen how law enforcement can have a negative effect on those we serve. The associated trauma with crime can prevent stability and challenge community well-being. Our mission and vision at PFS is a strong community where opportunity, stability, and wellness are secured for all. After the summer of 2020, there was a lot of energy and enthusiasm from both the community and law enforcement to make changes. Many listening sessions and town halls were held. A few new programs have been started, but the systems change that the community was asking for has not yet materialized. We have not done the work to fully reimagine public safety. At Thrive and PFS, we see our role as helping the community and law enforcement come together for conversations to reimagine public safety. At our first conversation in December, we reviewed the data available to establish that we have the same issues with policing here in San Mateo County as across the nation. We have racial disparities in policing. We have populations that are fearful of police, and we have incidents of police encounters that have led to unnecessary deaths. We recognize the importance of continuing the conversation of a sustained effort in order to make progress. It was very clear as we were planning the first event that we were going to need a second event to talk about our collaborative paths forward. And today we have an engaging group of panelists to elevate this conversation. Our goal today is to begin to build bridges between the community and law enforcement so we can work together to ensure this community is designed for all of us to be and feel safe and secure. I'm grateful that Petra will be our moderator today. Take it away, Petra.
Thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate this. This is a great opportunity to have discussions, but a couple of ground rules first. And some of them are practical and some of them should be obvious. So first of all, we're having this translated, so please speak slowly and clearly for our translators. And for those of you who would like, if you press the live transcript button at the bottom, you can actually get a transcript as we're speaking. So if you miss anything, you can read it. But the general ground rules are really pretty basic, which is assume good intentions, treat each other well. I think everybody knows that, but it's always good when we're talking about sensitive topics like this to reiterate that. So I want to welcome our guests. Each one of our 4 guests will deliver a 5 to 10 minute talk, telling us why they're here, what's their relationship to the community, and why building bridges is important to them. After that, we'll have a panel with some questions from me. And then after that, we'll have Q&A from the audience. We'll take the questions in chat. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker. Kalimah. So Kalimah is a valued member of our community. She has been participated in so many Thrive events and so many different things that we've done because she's really passionate about our community. Very passionate about community health. She's on the Jefferson Union High School District Board of Education. She was elected in 2012. She's on the board of the Housing Leadership Council. She's on the board of Kalimah as of this year. During the COVID-19 crisis, she was one of the founding members of the REACH Coalition, which advocated for equity and community health for all. She was also serves on the Leadership Council for the Recovery Initiative for San Mateo counties. We are very honored to have Kalimah here. And with that, I will let her tell her story.
Thank you. Thank you for Thrive and everyone for hosting it. I want to thank all of my fellow panelists for being here and engaging in this what can be at times a very challenging conversation and topic. My name is Kalimah Salahuddin. My pronouns are she, her. And talking about challenging, I get to go first, which is always nice. I thought a lot about this, and I'm just going to start my timer. I thought a lot about this topic and how I wanted to go about it, because I feel like we've talked this a lot, and I don't want to have another event where we talk it and then we just move on, and people either feel defensive or feel like they weren't heard, and we just continue along on the same path that we've been on for a while. And so that's a hard thing. And how do we move forward in 5 minutes? So I'm just going to acknowledge that I don't think it's possible for us to do a huge systems change within this event. But what I would like to do is have this be a start of an ongoing conversation where we get vulnerable and really have a deep dive discussion in how the systems that we're all a part of are affecting certain members of our community in different ways, and the system creates different outcomes. And this is not by chance, it's by design. It has historically been designed that way. So unless we are ready to be disruptive to the system, the same inequities will keep going. That we have to be okay having uncomfortable conversations, and that in times it makes people get defensive, and I'm hoping that people can push through and really hear what everyone on in the panel is saying to each other. And this includes myself. I wrote myself a little note, stay open-minded and to really hear with an empathetic ear. But I really wanted to start with how do we define safety, and more importantly, who gets defined safety? And I think for a long period of time, communities of color have not been allowed to define what they determine as safe. We are told this is how you have a safe community. And we are saying repeatedly that we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe. And this is what we need to do. And this is what we would like to have happen in order to feel safe. And I just would like that to be heard at some point in this county. Can we hear that? And then not take it as this is not a personal attack against anyone, because I am part of an institution that creates unsafety. I am a school board member, and I'm here to say schools do harm. And I stand here as a product of all the wonderful things that schools did for me, and also the failings. I had wonderful teachers who had fantastic intentions, wonderful staff who had fantastic intentions, but they still had outcomes held up by historic systemic oppression that caused huge problems for me as a Black person within that school district. Education, healthcare, law enforcement, we all are part of this system. We as Americans have bias, right? All of us have bias. So are we acknowledging, especially in the roles that these specific institutions play, when those biases come to bear, the harm that it can cause, that we have more power to cause more harm, that our biases in these institutions can change lives and sometimes end lives. So if we're not ready to acknowledge that, hey, we come with bias, and then say, how does that bias play out in hiring? How does that bias play out in policy? How does that bias play out in how we engage with the community? Because a lot of times when I talk to law enforcement, I talk about, these are the problems that I'm having in certain communities. The response I get back in talking about the communities is immediately to talk about gangs, immediately to talk about crime. And so I'm like, is that bias? I think that's bias showing up, and it's unintentional. But if your only interaction with certain communities, or the majority of your interaction with certain communities, are based in certain criminal activities, gangs, or drugs, how is it that as a human being, you don't have internalized bias? Because I know as a school board member, constantly hearing about my own community, constantly hearing about Black students failing, constantly hearing about how we don't measure up, constantly hearing about how we don't meet standard, I have to check my own bias, and even about how I feel about my own community. Like, is it us? And have to re-engage in, there is some accountability to be had within our own community, but also to acknowledge the system that are put in place that create these inequities. That how we are disciplined differently, how the tests are for us land differently, how the way we engage students and the way we refer students positively and negatively can influence outcomes. So when I'm looking at the way that data is handled and the way we get data, when I'm looking at oversight, when I'm looking at just how how criticism is handled, it's hard for me to say, how do we build a bridge we first have to acknowledge the problem, and then the part that we all play, and how do we work together to build systems that will also provide safety, but also include the definition of the community and safety, because I want to be able to call the police if there's a problem. I want to be able to say, hey, if there's something that breaks in my house, I want to call the police. But every time in the back of my mind, there's a fear. And that is a real thing. So how do we engage so many community members who look like me, who feel the same way, so that when I call the police, I have the same sort of outcome as anybody else that calls the police? And it's not just the over-policing in our communities, but it's the under-policing everyone else. When we look at the data for San Mateo County, and I know there's a lot of back and forth about the data, that's another thing. Like, how can we get data that we all agree upon? How do we start that process? But when we look at the data, it's just like every institution, there's disproportionate outcomes for Black and Brown students, or Black and, I'm so used to saying students every time I talk as somebody who's in education, so excuse me, Black and Brown community members. There's a disproportionate outcome. So, but we also need to look at every other member of, other racial and cultural groups. Are they being under-policed? If you look at the makeup of the community and all of the people who make it up, are some people being over-policed, but are some people being under-policed? We know that we don't commit crimes more than any other group, but we're pulled over more. What are our arrest records? Are we engaged more? And in that engagement, is that engagement creating bias? And then I know I'm hitting my time, and so I just want to end on saying, I'm a mother. My kids, 2 of my kids still live in this area. Because I get pulled over so much, my daughters don't drive. They just take Uber. And I know so many parents who are of minority communities who have similar stories. And I know that as a county, we can be and do better. And I want to help uplift others to do better. And I'm here to do the work, but we first have to live in the reality that we're in and acknowledge the problem, and not just get defensive and dismiss. That's all. Thank you.
Kalimah, thank you so much for your powerful words. I think you set the right tone for this, which is, we do have a problem. We do need to acknowledge it, but we're all here to work on it. And I appreciate that you acknowledge that this is the start of a conversation, that we are not going to be absolutely done and have figured everything out by 4:30 today, but that everyone here in the room is here because we want to build the bridges and we want to work at this. So thank you for your opening remarks. We'll now hear from Susan Manheimer. Chief Manheimer recently retired after 39 years, had leadership positions in many different police agencies, but among other things was the chief here in the city of San Mateo for quite a while. She's an expert in progressive criminal justice policies and strategies, including crime reduction through public-private partnerships, social and procedural justice, and progressive reforms in policing and executive development. And she was the only woman to serve as a president of the California Police Chiefs Association, where she received many awards. What we really appreciate is all of her thought partnership in continuing to be engaged in San Mateo County. So Chief Manheimer, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. First, I want to say and acknowledge that all these incredible 91 participants, I think I know almost all of them and have worked with all of them throughout my career. So it is nice to be back on this side of the bay and in San Mateo County. We all have challenges, but this county has always been close and worked together on those, and it, particularly with our community-based organizations, so Thrive and all the rest of you. I'm delighted to be a part of this. I want to say that I early on asked that we could bring in, since I am retired, I'm working for the Department of Justice on issues simply around transforming police agencies and cities to align on crime, community policing, and really in transforming our profession. But I wanted to make sure that we had someone currently in the county, as I'm not going to be speaking for my former agency or any of the chiefs currently, but I thought I'd take a bit of a different tact, and it's a little bit longer, but I really wanted to take you through not my whole 37 years, but at least a little bit of the overview of policing and the transformations that we've made over time, so that you can kind of understand the moment where we are now and what's informing my thoughts around where we move forward. Early on, I was really delighted as I joined the San Francisco Police Department after growing up on the streets of the Bronx and looking at police as, you know, sort of our heroes. They were on the footbeat. They knew everyone. They knew what time the kids better be home. And, you know, I wanted to be a hero one day. And luckily, my parents didn't tell me that women couldn't be heroes or police officers until well after I graduated high school. But I was pleased and delighted to be with the San Francisco Police Department. And really early on, just at the advent of what I call the community policing phase of our profession, where we were walking the footbeat, we were embedded and immersed with the nonprofits and the residents and the merchants, everyone else who came to work and play in the city of San Francisco. I worked the Tenderloin, the Mission, Union Square, and I really got to know what it was to be aligned with and embedded with the priorities, concerns, and cares of our community. And I think it was really Sir Robert Peel, who is, we call the father of modern policing, that kind of said, we are a part of the community, not apart from the community. I came in maybe to want to chase bank robbers, but I early learned that the children who were waiting in the bus stops in the Tenderloin and not safe from needles and drug dealers and harm really were the priorities for that community. And so we did what we always do in policing, is transform and align and try and evolve and change with what the priorities of our community are. And I think several things happened between those earlier days of the footbeat and being those aligned community police officers that in the intervening years have caused us to really evolve and change even more. And I point to another time in policing that perhaps was something like this time, though I don't think in my 37 years there's been a transformative moment in policing, certainly, as there is in our community and our society right now. And, you know, that's something that I think we all have to jump on, embrace, and really look for the opportunities to rise to the moment and see what the changes are. But you'll recall that as we started getting into sort of crack cocaine and more violence, particularly in the urban areas, police were tasked with the job of getting the guns and drugs out of the hands of those most violent, and turned to tactics and strategies, which at the time seemed to be both effective and really reduce crime in a lot of our communities. Now, later on, as we recall, and we adapted again, it really became apparent, and probably not till significantly later, that our criminal justice system started to see evidence and backlash that those tactics and strategies were really ones that created harms within our community, that while they may have been suppressing the violent crime, may have really sort of turned us into a bit of an occupying and oppressive force in some of our communities and created harms as well. And so I think it was incumbent upon all of us to really look at, and our profession did both embrace that through some of our own initiative, through our researchers and tacticians, and through, frankly, legislation at the federal and the state levels, which really caused this sort of evolution in our tactics and strategies. So we realized early on that really two things are necessary to build safe communities, and that is relationship building and trust, the trust that will have those turn to us as we co-produce safety together. Really, a community can only be as safe, and I think Kalimah said it really well earlier. Has anyone asked us and talked to us about what it is for us to feel safe? And I'm going to posit by the end of my comments that what is it that our community will feel safe around the police? That is a second part of this equation, and I hope that it gets to some of what Kalimah was asking about earlier. I think there's dialogue that we have to have. So again, now we find ourselves really looking at training, policies, implicit, explicit bias, procedural justice, and some of those changes that we really have made over the last several years, but even more, I think, coming out of that whole crack cocaine epidemic, and really some of the strategies that we use that we understand now really in a lot of ways only provided vacuums, and systems that were not working even turned to worse outcomes after our strategies impacted those communities. And so we find ourselves now with new challenges, again, having to adapt and to align with our communities and civic values. However, I would say one of the things that we have over the last several years, and certainly leading into this year, already been at the table, I think, having some of those conversations and having deep, long looks at ourselves as a profession. You know, I am all over the country. I work nationally with the Department of Justice, and I have to say that one of the things that really hit home for me was that finally, I believe that police across this country recognized that this dissonance and discord was one which really made us stand up and embrace as a profession the transformative moment of change and reform. So then what is the change and reform? What are the things that both our communities and others are looking for us to lead the way on? And certainly, if not to lead the way on, to be impacted with, such that we will change. I will say that there are a lot of conflicting research, a lot of demands of both reform, defund, reimagine, and mostly what I have found in my really time in the last several years, being both an advisor to organizations and also being in the chair at Oakland PD for a very, very impactful year in 2020, 2021, is that a lot of folks have a very litmus polarizing opinions about what that change and that reform should look like. And it's my hope through informed and intentionally meaningful and constructive dialogue that we can find the shared purpose and goals. There is so much that's not really known about policing. And sometimes I had to wonder over the last several years, did people want to understand what it is and why it is that we do our tactics and strategies? Because just stopping them was simply not an option for those of us who are charged with serving and protecting our communities. We need to understand what is it about those, and what will happen if we just start to stop them, if you understand, and pardon my pun on that. And so can we really seek to hear and understand these underlying interests, and most especially include police leadership when considering the policies and practices of policing by bringing us to the table for these discussions? There isn't an agency in America that has not in some way turned towards our research, turned towards the community discord, and really started to change and evolve in ways that include the impacts that our policies have within our community. But I ask you, if these litmus polarizing issues are so prevalent, how do we get past the either or to the and truly discuss them? And I'm going to give you 5 quick examples, because these are ones that just, for me, highlight some of what I think people really believe one way or the other so definitively that I'm not sure they can get to the middle on that. So is higher reporting of crime indicative of more crime or more trust in the criminal justice system? Are traffic stops harmful, particularly to our BIPOC communities, or do they in fact increase traffic safety and get guns off the street for those within those areas? Was the turnaround in New York City for those areas so consumed with violent crime that kids were wearing bulletproof vests to the playground effective, or simply a harmful stop and frisk policy that targeted these communities? Is the advent of effective, less fatal, less lethal weapons a great innovation, or is it simply leading to less fatal police shootings, but more use of force incidents? Are the reason for police use of force and shootings a causal effect of tremendous increases in violent crime, or causing police more harms and caution? Or simply are the communities more at risk because of their heightened caution and the violent crime? Are the reasons for increased crime due to judicial reforms and lack of accountability, or is it due to the pressures and failures of clearly inequitable failed social systems? Are school resource officers an effective preventive calming presence to prevent and reduce crime and arrests on campus, which, by the way, I do have some data of San Mateo, at least San Mateo High School, but Are they also a contributor to the school to prison pipeline and not the right answer for having uniformed officers on campus? Do advanced technologies afford communities greater protections from crime and victimization, or do they lead to a more oppressive police state? I take my precious time to share those with you because I think each and every one of those will have goaded you to sort of sit on one side or the other. It's yes or it's no. And the problem is that it is not an either or. These are all nuanced conversations with the and being somewhere in the middle. And I will say that if in fact we are going to look at all the lenses and value sets through these discussions, we hope that you seek to understand as well where the police position is on this, simply because positions are not interests and not shared goals. How do we get to that? With my vantage point nationally and having served as a police officer and leader in San Mateo, Alameda, and San Francisco counties for the past 37 years, I believe that we need to come to facts and get past the emotion and frustration. I am not judging that there is emotion, that there is intensity, and that there may be well-founded hurts and harms through this. But I hope that as we get to these conversations, we find the common ground and resolution. My experience around that approximate year I spent at Oakland PD as their interim chief, 20 to 21, is that policing is at the forefront of every conversation and policy decision, and that taught me so much. It taught me that there is not one monolithic community and opinion, that there are so many different lenses, concerns, needs, and priorities in serving our many different communities, that we need seek first to understand the other's point of view, to neither blame nor shame, to be culturally competent and respectful, to be constructive and appreciative of all points of view, and to try and find the shared values through interest-based discussions and outcomes that harm the least. What really helped me with this was initiating a conversation, and I would leave you sort of with this because I think this is the example of how we get to the discussions we need. I kept it really simple, recognizing that there were so many in harm and so many in need, especially in Deep East Oakland and other communities. The question I would posit to you all, and I did to them, and had some great discussions, and we got to some shared purpose and shared resolution. What will keep is this question: what will keep our communities safe? And frankly, what will keep our communities feeling safe around the police? I think it's got to be the two. They're really dependent upon each other. And so in my mind, as an example of neighborhoods and special interests and advocacy groups, I got earfuls from all these different communities with their own special interests. And then when I went back to the neighborhood and the community that we were serving, with the folks who had to duck under their tables, with other folks who felt they were being stopped disparately at many times, the conversations that we had with those neighborhoods and with rebuilding the bridges one by one with our community became the most perfect storm in coupling that high risk, high gain conversation, which I know you're trying to have here, in really shaping it and making sure that it's not just a rhetorical question or a countywide question. It really is specific to communities and to their police. And I believe many agencies here in our county and across the Bay Area are already having these conversations and are open to them. So I am happy to report that in my work across the country and the state, our profession is clearly focused on the evolution into contemporary, transparent organizations that are embracing meaningful reforms in alignment with civic and community values. But I also want to stress that a really important part of furthering these discussions is having your police leaders, our police leaders, around the table. We are your subject matter experts in policing. We've been in it a long time. We truly do want to provide safety, co-produce it with you, and be aligned and supported by you, with you, and for you. Simply seeking to both understand the issues and why they are the way they are, and the ability to share those concerns is something we seek out and we want. I want to tell you as I close that here in California, the state has enacted major sweeping oversight and reforms statewide over the past few years, and more are proposed. I think this is very important to this discussion. If you haven't been aware of it, I'm just going to go down 5 points and then I'll end. The reforms enacted to date over this past year: decertification of police officers for specific sustained complaints and conduct, mandated collecting of racial profiling data, RIPA data for 2022, with reporting out for every agency in the state to begin posted, not only on their own websites, but also on the state RIPA data website, beginning the first quarter of January 2023. Mandatory public release and timelines for and reports of all associated media and video involving use of force resulting in hospitalization and death. Mandatory public release and timelines for all investigations of significant officer misconduct. Mandatory independent state attorney general's investigations for officer-involved shootings. So I share that with you to say that these are major sweeping measures, and that our agencies are, and I just came from the California Police Chiefs Association training conference, where we are all struggling to catch up, to keep up, to enact these sweeping reforms, collectively embrace, incorporate, and operationalize them in this incredible rate and pace of reforms enacted here in the state of California. I know that most of our agencies also have started their own transparency pages, and I encourage you to get involved and to look at both these and other measures. So as we couple this with the increasing complexity of crime, and also delivering on our oath to protect and serve our public in partnership with you so that you feel safe and also safe with us, it is not an either or. We can have the and: justice, procedural justice, and safety. So I will share with you that we are, as I see, both in our county and across the country, evolving yet again to the reforms and alignment with our communities. You may not, it takes a while to see change. I'm not saying we're everywhere where we need to be yet, but having served in all these different agencies, I can assure you that our goal is to align with, be dedicated to, and be a proud reflection of the communities we serve. Our community's values and priorities are vitally important, and I think we can only be safer and stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the big picture, knowing that law enforcement really understands that there are issues, and also just the discussion of maybe it's not so black and white. There's a lot of ands here, so hopefully we can get to some of those ands. So thank you for your comments. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Nick Jasso. He's the Fresh Lifelines for Youth, also known as FLY, Youth Voice Policy Coordinator. He's an alumnus of the program as well. Since graduating from FLY, he's put his skills and natural talent to work locally as a FLY volunteer, advocate for justice reform, and nationally as an AmeriCorps volunteer. And we really appreciate your voice, Nick.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for some grace if I have to pause or take some deep breaths. I'm just getting over COVID right now, so I'm still a little short of breath. But yeah, hi, my name is Nick. I'm the Youth Voice Policy Coach at Fresh Lifelines for Youth, UCI alum, longtime San Mateo County resident. I've been here my whole life. I've been a part of every juvenile justice committee in the county that you can think of. If it has J's and C's in the acronym, I'm probably in it. So I've been around for a while now. And really what I'm here to tell you, at least in this portion, is I'll just tell you a little bit about my story and about my experience with police in San Mateo County. Growing up here, I went through all the elementary schools, the middle schools, the high school. And my interactions with law enforcement started very early on. I actually was in the PAL league for baseball growing up. My grandpa was the coach, and so that was my earliest interaction with police in San Mateo County. But as I started to get older, and I started to get into trouble in school, I started to interact more with school resource officers. So it started with getting detentions and being talked to after class. and having to meet with the school resource officer in my school, started becoming me being policed in my community. So I was riding my bike without a helmet, or riding my bike without the correct reflectors, and receiving tickets, and increasing my my interactions with police. My suspensions, or my detentions, turned into suspensions. And eventually, when I was 14 years old, I got into a fight with another young man on campus and ended up getting incarcerated. I was arrested on campus by a school resource officer. And I served 30 days in juvenile hall, 64 days EMP, another 1.5 years on probation. Had to do a bunch of court mandated classes and therapy and all these other things, right? And I only bring that up because a few months later, a very similar incident happened with one of my white classmates who happened to be a little affluent as well. And he got suspended for a few days. While I did 30 days in juvenile hall, 64 days on EMP, 1.5 years in probation, and like this plethora of attachment inside the juvenile justice system. And so I'm here today not speaking in terms of overall community safety, because I can't speak on that entirely. But what I am an expert on is juvenile justice and youth justice. So I'm here as an advocate. I'm here as a formerly incarcerated person. And so that is the lens that that I'm coming from, that I'm seeing this through, and that I was speaking from. Sorry, COVID breath. And so when it comes to making our community safer, and when it comes to rebuilding relationships with police and with our young people, I think that the first thing that has to happen is I think that police need to get out of schools. It's well documented across California, across the United States, that my story of school resource officers and leading to arrest is not unique. This is something that happens across the country, across our state, all throughout our county. It is harmful for our young Black and brown communities. These police contacts in the form of arrest, they decrease our chances of going to graduating high school, which decreases our chances of going to college, which increases our chances of being incarcerated as an adult. The school resource officer definitely serves in the school to prison pipeline, right? And secondly, I think that if we really want to start repairing our relationships with young people and with our police, I think that we really need to create a formalized board, a youth advisory council, for our young people to meet with officers, meet with our peace officers here in San Mateo County, and be able to give those feedbacks and give that advice, because they are the experts on this, right? They're out here living the communities, they're riding their bikes without helmets, they're getting in trouble in class, and they can best answer these questions that we have, right? So my last thing that I'll leave you with before we pass it to the next person, right, is that those that are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So if we want to figure out what to do next, we need to talk to our young people, we need to talk to our community members, and we need to create a formalized board, a formalized way for people to do that. Yeah, I'm not anti-police. I'm just anti-police in schools. And I would love to see our communities healed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, so much for your words and for sharing your story. And we really appreciate, especially when you said that that, you know, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. We're hoping that we have a lot of those people in the room right now. And our last speaker will be Dan Mulholland, who's the Chief of Police in Redwood City. He's been there for over 3 decades. He was sworn in as Chief of Police in 2018 and oversees a department of over 128. And he began his career in 1985, so he's been around for a while. And Dan, we would love to hear more about Redwood City.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. In addition to serving as Chief of Police of the Redwood City Police Department, I am also serving as a 2022 President of the San Mateo County Police Chiefs and Sheriff's Office and Sheriff's Association. I'll be speaking today on behalf of the Redwood City Police Department. Nick, I appreciate your comments, because I think you're going to hear today in a portion of my presentation about how we're working to increase our connectivity with the youth in the Redwood City community, how we are empowering them, how we do have a board together that is working with this group on the very issues you described, starting with bike riding behavior. I'll elaborate on that a little bit further in my presentation, but really what I want to focus on is kind of where we were at Redwood City regarding our connectivity with the community, what we heard over the last couple of years, and then where we're going now. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about the importance of building bridges between the community and law enforcement, because I fully embrace the significance of that relationship. In law enforcement, we receive our authority from you, our community members, and our delivery of effective public safety service is carried out in partnership with the community that we serve. This partnership exists with all community members, not just backgrounds or and not just adults, but youth, but businesses, or schools, and our faith-based organizations. And this partnership is based on trust, and that trust comes from familiarity and connectivity. And at the Redwood City Police Department, we've long embraced and valued that connection with the community, and we've accomplished that in a number of ways. And there's some signature events where we've connected with underserved community members over the years through our annual holiday toy and book drive. We connect with our youth and adult volunteers, whether it's through the Police Explorer programs or volunteers in police service. We have a very robust social media platforms where we can connect that way. We have Police Activities League. There's various outreach events, most notably in an informal setting, our Coffee with the Cops event, which provides a very informal setting for community members and police officers to get together and connect over particular issues that a neighborhood might be experiencing. We also have larger scale events like National Night Out, but our signature events are Spanish and English language police community police academies. And also, once I became Chief of Police, we then expanded that to include youth academies. And this is a multi-month program where members of the community, both English speaking and Spanish speaking, can come into a specific training environment. We invite them into our home here at the police department. They understand our operations. Information is shared regarding our policies, our procedures. They receive training in a myriad of police related operations, and they really get that almost, it's like a mini academy for community members. We started the same thing for youth during the summer. So we found that it's a great way to humanize our positions, to help community members understand that there is a person that's wearing this uniform. There's an individual that's capable of great things and sometimes some failings that is wearing the badge, but it really helps to humanize the position and demystify what we do. In addition to that, we partner with a number of nonprofit organizations to help us better serve the community, whether that's through homeless outreach organizations such as Life Moves or Street Life Ministries. For sexual assault victims or survivors, we have rape trauma services. We have communities overcoming relationship abuse. We've utilized the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center to help resolve long-standing simmering issues, or to help us have better dialogue with the community over particular issues. And then also most recently, our partnership with Star Vista on our Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team, which I'll cover a little bit later. The events over the last 2.5 years have really brought about a profound period of change in the law enforcement profession, one that I've not seen in my more than 3 decades of service. And it's triggered a period of reflection, a period of transformation, and also a period of reform. I participated in a number of the community listening sessions hosted by the city of Redwood City, which were moderated by the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. And as I listened to some of the feedback that was shared about policing and about my organization, frankly, I got a little bit defensive. And I wanted to challenge many of the things that were being said. But I also came to the realization that it was vital for me to listen, to hear the concerns expressed by our community members, and understand that frankly, that my life experiences as a white male police executive were very different from the life experiences that were being shared in these listening sessions by members of the community. The irony is that there was no greater time in the history of the law enforcement profession for us to connect and build relationships and really get to know our community members. But because of the restrictions associated with the global pandemic, we didn't have that connection. We couldn't hold our signature events where we could get together in person and better understand on a one-on-one basis or in a small group setting more about what the community wanted to see from their police departments. We were prevented from restricting, or we restricted because of social distancing requirements, or gatherings were restricted. Us just going out for a coffee with cops event, it couldn't happen. It was really unfortunate because that came at a time where it was needed most, and as a result, the perceived disconnection and divide between the community and law enforcement grew. But that doesn't mean we weren't listening at the Redwood City Police Department. And over the last 2 years, we've applied a lot of what we've heard from the community. And as a result of hearing from the community, the Redwood City Police Department has become a more transparent police agency. Our policies, our training, our demographics, data related to calls for service, use of force summaries, patrol operations, all of that is readily available online. We've adjusted policies, we've adjusted our training, changed the equipment that we utilized. We changed our operations, and there were even changes to our budget that aligned with community expectation. We implemented a body-worn camera program, and that's going to be expanded in the current fiscal year to include a vehicle-mounted camera system for greater transparency. We're gathering data in order to comply with the Racial and Identified Profiling Act. And that data will be reported, as Chief Manheimer mentioned, in early 2023. And we've also implemented a number of new initiatives. Our Police Advisory Committee is one, and that this body serves as an advisory body to me. It was formed in March of 2021. It's tasked with reviewing city policies or Redwood City Police Department policies and procedures. It's tasked with sharing and reviewing community concerns related to crime and policing practices. And this body also receives an annual report on the personnel complaint processes. And this committee meets monthly. It's received in-depth overview of police department operations, our policies and procedures, how we train members of our organization, how we train in the police use of force, the internal complaint process, patrol functions, really received the gamut of instruction in an all-day session in what we do at the Redwood City Police Department. They've also received training on how we handle calls for service involving those that are suffering from mental illness or in mental health crisis, and how we respond to homeless-related calls for service. We've also partnered with 3 other cities within San Mateo County, Daly City, South San Francisco, and the city of San Mateo, as well as the county of San Mateo and the nonprofit Star Vista, to implement the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team. And this endeavor was a direct outcome of the listening sessions wherein we were asked to consider suitable alternatives to involving law enforcement personnel on calls for service, involving people that were experiencing mental health crisis. And through this Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team, we now have a highly trained mental health clinician employed by Star Vista that is assigned to the Redwood City Police Department. Clinician Baker responds in tandem with our officers on calls for service involving people experiencing mental health related issues. The clinician works in collaboration with our officers to help determine an appropriate course of action for this person in crisis. They're tasked with conducting assessments or suggesting other suitable resources and determining the most effective course of action to assist those that are in mental health crisis. This is a 2-year pilot program. It began in December of 2021 and really kicked off with the clinician at the beginning of the year. And it's being independently evaluated by researchers from Stanford University's John W. Gardner Center. And we're very much looking forward to a review of the initial assessment when it becomes available. In addition to that, with the start of the current fiscal year, the Redwood City Police Department is launching an independent staffing and service analysis. It'll include an in-depth top-down review of all our department operations. It'll include a comparison with other police departments and communities, similar police departments in similar communities in our region. They'll look at our calls for service and how we respond to those. They'll do a deep dive into our operations. They'll look at our staffing. They'll look at our personnel allocations. It'll really be a true deep dive into what we do with the department. And most importantly, and this is what I think that speaks to Nick's point about now what we can do with matters involving our youth, and that's we're reconsidering our traditional response to public safety concerns in order to incorporate the feedback that we've received from our community members. An example of this is a collaborative response that is underway now that involves disruptive behavior exhibited by teenagers and young adults in downtown Redwood City. And what began as low-level gatherings, boisterous behavior by youth, nuisance activities such as littering or bikes being scattered about on the sidewalk and in the streets, or unsafe stunt riding on the sidewalks and in the roadway. We've come to find out that this was part of a broader national movement called the Bike Life Movement. It was activities that traditional aged or transitional aged youth were involved in. But this evolved into taunting, harassing of members of the public, taunting of police. It evolved into fireworks complaints where they were being set off. There were fights that were taking place. There were vandalism events that were taking place in the downtown core of Redwood City. And this disruption peaked in late May with very dangerous explosive fireworks actually being shot at people, visitors to the downtown, being shot at buildings. There was fights that were involved. There was fighting with the police. A number of arrests were made. Now, this is where the listening sessions have come into play, because with my experience in the profession, I had a very different understanding of how we would traditionally respond to something like this. Our traditional approach would have been a heavy police presence, a zero tolerance enforcement stance. But instead, the police department in the city took a much more balanced approach and leveraged our relationships with various community-based organizations. And these included the Redwood City Police Activities League, Redwood City Together, and I noticed that the executive director, Rafael Avendaño, is on this call. Live in Peace, an organization that's based out of East Palo Alto that's centered around youth in the relationship with outreach to youth through bicycles. We're working with various faith-based organizations, a Redwood City School District, or Park and Recs Department, police and fire department working together, business stakeholders in downtown Redwood City, even healthcare representatives. This endeavor has become known by the acronym as the ACE plan. And again, I don't want you to have the impression that this is the Redwood City Police Department taking all the credit for this. This is not. We play a role in implementation of the ACE plan, but I've got to give credit to Rafael and Redwood City Together and Ivan Martinez from our Redwood City PAL program for their work on this. And also the city of Redwood City. But the ACE plan stands for Action, Create, and Engage. And this is a proposed one-year pilot initiative focusing on transitional aged youth between ages of 12 and 24. And we'll really be focusing on youth crime, truancy, and criminal disobedience that's occurring within Redwood City and in our surrounding communities. The program is a community-based pilot initiative that aims to nurture positive relationships between the community leaders, between law enforcement, between the youth associated with the bike life movement, both within Redwood City and in the North Fair Oaks area of unincorporated Redwood City. We're in the very early stages of this program, and we're very encouraged by the outcomes that we've seen thus far. We've seen disruptions or a reduction in disruptive and criminal behavior occurring in our downtown core. We've created opportunities for open dialogue with youth and stakeholders in our community. And most importantly, the youth have been given a voice and have had an opportunity to shape future programming. Most impressive was Raphael and Ivan bringing in the youth leaders from this bike life group, talking to them about how we could make something like this work together. What would be some of the barriers to the outcome, which included, continued disruptive behavior, fireworks or airsoft guns being brought into downtown, and sort of an agreement was reached with these youth who were empowered to make decisions on behalf of their peers and on behalf of effective programming to cease kind of this violent disruptive behavior and focus on the good things that we'll be able to do together. And also there were some really acute needs that were recognized as part of this outreach effort. Quite literally, these participants, these teenagers and these younger dudes young adults were coming hungry, literally and physically. They were given food, they were given pizza. Some of them hadn't eaten or hadn't had a decent meal that day. So that connection through food, but they were also hungry to make a difference, and they were empowered to be able to shape what this program will look like. They were hungry for mentorship, and that's where a lot of these community-based organizations and members of our business group have come alongside to help. And they were in need of employment. And we've seen our businesses step forward and be able to provide support to a number of youth already with sustainable jobs. We're making great progress on this initiative, but frankly, much work remains. And not unlike what we've heard that this is a work in progress. Well, there is more work that needs to be done, and frankly, more financial support is needed. So while I'm here, I'm going to give a plug and challenge all who are participating in the forum today to consider supporting this endeavor with your time and your talent and your treasures. Raphael's point of contact, I can send that out, or if you email me or chat with me, I'll share more. But I shared earlier, about the value we place on partnering with the community to improve public need, representative of how it takes a village to be successful and to improve community safety. I'm very excited about this partnership and the role the Redwood City Police Department is playing with the community, because together we're making a difference. We're making a positive difference for our youth. We're making a positive difference for our families, and we're making a positive difference for our businesses. Again, this will take time. I appreciate your patience. I look for opportunities for those individuals and organizations that are represented here to partner with us and help us make a difference, and use this Redwood City example of something perhaps that we can apply at a broader level in the county. So thanks again for giving me the opportunity to share with you. I appreciate your attention when I spoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We really appreciate all of those examples of positive changes that you've made over the last couple of years. We are, as Susan said, in kind of a unique point in time where there's a lot of focus and a lot of energy around change. So what I'd like to hear from our community members, from Nick and from Kalimah, both Dan and Susan have talked about a lot of change, some that's just starting, some that's coming down the line, some that's already been implemented. From the community side, and let's start with Kalimah, are we going in the right direction? Are these things that feel positive and that you would like to build on, or is there other stuff that you're really looking for?
So I will just say, and I will reference one of Susan's questions when she talked about New York and stop and thrift and the safety that, quote unquote safety that was provided to that community, or how a community changed. For me, community safety does not include a removal of our humanity. Stop and frisk removed humanity. So for me, that is not safety. If I am afraid to let my male son go outside out of fear that he will be stopped just because he's Black, that is not safety. So maybe there's less crime, but it's not safe. And that to me is the key point that needs to be heard. And, you know, even here, like we had time limits and folks went over, and I'm just like, there's a lot of defensiveness. And I understand this in education where we want to, like, because we're under attack all the time. And I have to stop myself from trotting out how awesome we are, because we are awesome. And instead, let's really look at how are we holding up systemic oppression, and look at it through the lens of the community and try to see their lived experience, because most of the people who are enforcing these laws don't have any lived experience of the communities in which they're policing. So to me, a lot of these programs sound great, but I know they're not community driven, because these are not things that we would come up with to hit the key issue, the core issue of why we don't feel safe. And then the second part of this is data. You know, and this is, again, I'm always leaning back on education, and how when we're talking about equity, and we always trot out tons of programs to solve equity, and is it actually producing outcomes that are quantifiable in data? And if they aren't, then those aren't solutions. Those are great programs, but they're not solving this key issue. And those are the things that I would like to see.
Nick, I'd like to hear from you too, especially regarding some of the youth programs that Chief Mulholland was talking about.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that when Chief Mulholland sorry, was describing the things that these young people were coming with, right? They were coming hungry. There were underlying barriers to or other factors that were leading to their delinquency, right? I think it is the role of our community-based organizations then to fulfill those. And I'm super glad that you are partnering with other organizations to do that, that you're having people who are not necessarily police officers be those mentors, right? And provide that structure and that mentorship in their lives, right? Because what leads to delinquency isn't, you know, the delinquent, right? It is it is the community. It's not the young person. Like, you don't blame the fish for being sick in the dirty fishbowl, right? Like we need to heal our communities. And so I do think that we're getting onto the right track with some of this stuff. And I'm super appreciative of the approach that Redwood City has taken in working with these young people. I live in Redwood City, and I always laugh when I see those kids on the bikes. You know, because it's you know, it's just young behavior. You know, it's funny to see those young people, and I see so much of myself in these young folks. And so I think that is the right track. We need more community organizations. We need more community members to step in, to mentor these young people, to help meet their needs of food and shelter and safety. And I think that those problems go away once you have that. And then you just have a group of kids that are riding bikes and doing tricks, right? And, you know, maybe they do dumb stuff on those, but we can't help that, right? That's the adolescent brain.
Kalimah, you were nodding your head with the community organizations.
Yes, I mean, the examples that the police chief in Redwood City spoke about, I mean, I agree with Nick. This is what we want to see, but I just want it followed up with, like, now are these achieving the outcomes that we want to attain? And that they don't have to be an either or. That doesn't mean we stop those programs, but we also need to look internally and at our internal systems, and not just have the majority of the work be externally driven, because the community isn't the issue, right? It's how we're dealing with the community. That's the issue that I'm talking about right here. How are we engaging the community? And what are we bringing from our core selves that is influencing the work that we do? And we each are bringing things from our core selves that influence our work. We each bring bias because that's who we are as human beings. So what are we doing to make sure that who we are isn't getting in the way of the work? It's parenting, right? I am always aware of my flaws, and as a parent, trying not to pass those down to my kids. Generational issues, trying to disrupt them so that my kids don't inherit them. And so when we're looking as community based organizations that have huge amount of influence, almost as much as parents, families, we have to be aware of those things. And what is the work that's being done in those areas so that we can ensure that even though we're not of those communities, we are representing the communities in a way that they would like to be represented, not in a way we feel is best, easiest, our version of safe. Because anytime we try to advocate for community safety, our community safeties are always sacrificed for the majority. And we have to be able to advocate for our safety too.
I'd like to take what you just said and turn it over to Dan and just kind of ask, what are you within the police department? What kind of work are you doing with training the officers and thinking about bias and how to do that work?
Probably one of the biggest or one of the biggest hurdles was mine, because I had a very traditional law enforcement response, and I'll look at this bike life movement and the some of the related negative outcomes for that. I'll look at my own position that I was in and recognize that as a more than 30-year veteran of law enforcement, I had a very old school initial thought process of how to handle this. And if I were to stick to a traditional thought process, it would be, if there's a nail, you just got to get a bigger hammer in order to solve the problem. But that's not what the community was looking for. We needed to look outside the box and be receptive to a different way of focusing on what we could do as a city, as a group of different departments, as a group of different community-based organizations, to all work together on what we could do to try to solve some of the issues. And that's where we partnered with our community-based organizations to help us try to resolve this. We've got great programming in-house through our juvenile office that could help working with the families, whether it's assistance with providing guidance to families who are struggling with a teen, if they are in need of parenting classes or referral to social services. There are other things that could be done internally that can support folks that are struggling with their kids. We have a very effective juvenile diversion program in-house where we try very hard to divert kids out of the juvenile justice system if they are found to be in violation of low-level first-time offenses. We look for ways to divert them out and to plug them into counseling service, maybe weave in a set of behavioral expectations that they have to abide by and counseling that they would receive. So we have this traditional mechanisms in place, but we also needed to weave in some of the broader things that we had heard from the community about long-term effective solutions to some of the problems that we were experiencing. And really the big thing was finding appropriate mentorship from these kids to empower them to be part of this change and to work with us on a solution that they could live with. If we had just come up with the rules or the expectations or the programming independently, we'd have much different outcomes. But by empowering the youth in our community, helping them to understand some of the disruption that they were causing, allow them an opportunity to come up with a code of conduct, if you will, for their peers, so it didn't compromise the work that we were trying to accomplish, get that buy-in, and now let's work together on moving forward with various programming that we can offer for the kids. So
There's a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say it really took a lot, and it took thinking very much outside of the box, and trying to come up with a different way of solving some of these issues. But it's as an outcome from some of the things that we've heard over the last couple of years, frankly.
So what we're talking a lot about public safety. We're talking about feeling safe around police. We're talking about the community being safe. What would you like to see? What would be an ideal? Let's start with Nick. We're talking about public safety as a larger picture.
Yeah. For me, like, I would like to not have a job. Like, I would like to not have a job. I would like for police to not have a job, right? Like, I would like for all of us to be out of work, right? Like, I would love to live in a community where we can coexist and co-create together, and really feel safe and really live in community, right? Now, do I think that we're close to that? Probably not, right? So I think that ideally what I would like to see, and again, this is from me, from the lens of juvenile justice, from the lens of like youth advocate, as a former incarcerated person, as someone who, is really tied to work in the juvenile justice system and for young people. I would like to see a youth advisory council here in San Mateo County that is countywide, not just city, that is countywide, to really address some of our juvenile justice issues and some of our issues here with youth in police, youth in crime, and all of that. I would really like us to tackle the public safety issue for young people in a youth advisory council that is countywide here in San Mateo County. That would be my big ask.
Excellent. We're going to give each of you a chance to give your big ask, but I'm also going to let you know that we only have 10 minutes left, so I'd like short, big asks. Susan.
I'm thinking back, I've been on the juvenile justice, all those JJCCs for about 21 years, and I'm still on it for our county. It's the most important thing we do, right? We started diversion in our county 20 years ago. And I believe almost every agency now has juvenile diversion. I know the one in San Mateo PD, which is the one I helped set up, we've hired 4 counselors. We want to be trauma informed. One of the most amazing things that for me, being on the Juvenile Justice Commission, is understanding the adolescent brain, the impulsivity, and working towards stopping the youth before they get the record pre-arrest diversion. We are doing that in this county. Not all of it, but I did see someone comment, there are some phenomenal programs in juvenile hall, and there needs to be more programs out of juvenile hall, but we do fund a ton of those in this county. The Youth Advisory Council, I believe most cities have one. The idea of one for the county, I don't know if we have one or not, but I think we're all on the same page there. I think we all need to have as much as we can do to divert juveniles out and not systematize them. We know for every 7 kids that go in, at least 3 graduate to the big prison system. So we're all about that. I certainly am as well.
Dan? What's your big ask?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I kind of align myself with Nick. I'd love to be out of a job, frankly. I'd love to live in a society where police are not needed. I think we're a long ways from it. We're not living in utopia. I think, and there's still, frankly, a need for police. What I would like to see is greater participation from our community members. We've heard a lot about what some community members don't want to see or think we shouldn't be doing. But I welcome the opportunity for community members that want to be a part of change to come alongside us. So have patience and be a participant and work alongside us on some of these initiatives where we will need your help on an ongoing basis. And I previously mentioned the need for time, talent, and treasure. Some of these things that are not funded by the general fund of the city of Redwood City, they're funded by other programs. Help us out with those. Be a volunteer, be a mentor to some of these kids. Come down on a Friday night in downtown Redwood City, find out how you can connect with them. If you're a business owner in the community and you need kids to work for you, and they need work because, as I said before, they're literally hungry, and they're grateful for the opportunity. So give them a chance to work for you and give them some sustainable employment. Give them the opportunity. So work alongside of the various community-based organizations that are out there working to make a difference. I invite you to do that. That's what I would like to see.
Thank you. Kalimah, what's your big ask?
So first I want to thank Susan Manheimer and Dan Mulholland for being here. And I know that this isn't an easy conversation and I appreciate your listening. So thank you so much. And Susan took time to talk to me before this and we've been friends for a while. So thanks to both of you. And what I would like is that for all communities, humanity to be seen. I want my humanity to be seen in all things, in law enforcement, in how justice is served, because police and law enforcement is just one part of the problem. It's also how we're prosecuted. It's also, how much time we're spent, being sent to jail. There's all kinds of aspects in healthcare, in education. I want all of our humanity to be seen and all of us to be dealt with equally and equitably. There needs to be a lot of equity so we can get to equality. And it is not just, we're talking about law enforcement now, but they're just one part of this overall puzzle so that my community and my interaction in this community is the same as everyone else's. I don't want less policing. I don't want there not to be police. I just want to be policed in the same way other communities are policed. I want my outcomes to be the same. And so that is what I would like. That is what I'm looking for. And I'm hoping that, at some point we can start having real conversations and real actions towards that real reality.
This is definitely the beginning of conversations that will continue, that need to continue in a lot of different places. Not just here, certainly not just on Zoom, because Zoom is not the best place to have these conversations, although I appreciate that almost 100 people were able to fit into this room. But I'd like to actually leave it with some ideas of what people should be doing. What are next steps? We kind of had the big ask, like this is what we'd like to see in an ideal world. What are some small concrete next steps? Or if there's anything else that you feel like you haven't had a chance to say, you each have about 1 minute to say it, but I would love to hear, I would love everybody in the room to go away saying, oh, I can do that. And I think Dan had some specifics about mentoring and supporting the community-based organizations. Nick, do you want to have some input on that as well?
Sure. I think my next step is probably the same as my big ask. Let's get an advisory council started for the entire county, not just for each city individually, but for the overall county. And then my other big ask, and I know that this wasn't necessarily supposed to be about young people and juvenile justice, right? And but my big ask is that when you see these kids, see your own kids, right? See yourself. These are young people. Just like these young people are getting in trouble on these bikes, right? Like I was there too, and And it wasn't until community-based organizations like Fresh Lifelines for Youth, the one that I work for now, came into my life and gave me some mentors and some positive adult role models that I was able to turn my life around. And so just see these young people as young people, see these kids as your kids, see these kids as kids, and just know that this could have been you, right? This could have been your kid. Yeah, that'll be my big ask or my takeaway.
Thanks. Susan, concrete steps or last things you want to impart?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conversation around what I said earlier, what will co-produce safety in our communities, and how will you feel safe around the police? That is really, I think, the conversation to be had, because it kind of cuts through, it kind of thin slices almost everything else. And I think it can get to, because I bet that's a different lens and different things for different people. We need to understand them all, because our community is broad and diverse, and there are obviously feelings that we are A, not serving, and B, not really. I mean, I think we need to open up the sort of blind spots and really figure out if those agencies aren't having those conversations with their communities, how do you start that? What's the template for it? And how do we make sure that, we can really get to that? That's it. I just feel, how do we feel safe having the conversation to feel safe? And what are the barriers and obstructions to feeling safe around each other? And then, shift the approach to address it. I think we all want that. Philosophically, we all want and need that to move forward. So I'm sorry it's so general, but that's kind of where I'm at, is continuing the conversation to better understand those things.
I like the framing of co-producing, because everybody here has talked about needs to be community and law enforcement together having these conversations. Kalimah, do you want to add some next steps?
So again, I go back to data. I would like to see some data that we all agree upon. And so we can't fix a problem if we don't truly understand the depth and breadth of it. I agree that I would love to see some civilian oversight put into place in sheriffs and in local police departments. I would really like to talk about, when we're on camp, and specifically to education, is there a way to have police on campus that are not in full gear or military gear? I know that's scary. Not to have a gun when you're on school campuses, how we deal with youth that when we arrest them, and the perp walk and all the different things, like walking a student out in cuffs in front of other students. I can go on and on. There's lots of things that I think that we can do and we can do better. And I feel like that I would like to have an ongoing conversation. So the last thing is to have this be an ongoing conversation that continues. I would love to stay engaged.
Great. Well, that's a great way to close out, that this is not the end. We really need to continue this conversation. It seems that a lot of the solutions are going to come through co-producing, through continuing the conversations, through making sure everybody feels heard, so that we can move forward. I so appreciate having been a part of this conversation. Heather and I have been working on this for a long time, and really having a lot of conversations with you all multiple times, and we really appreciate all of the time and the dedication and the sincerity with which you're focusing on something that's really important to our entire community. This is not a fringe issue. This is really for everyone, and your input is invaluable, and I think everybody in the room really appreciates the time. So thank you so much for being here, for being part of the conversation, for, I think, promising to continue to be part of the conversation. I think I heard that from everyone, and we will keep going with that. And I just want to add an extra special thank you to Heather, who's been just a terrific thought partner as we've been working on this together for more than a year now. And so I'll turn it to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra, our amazing moderator, and thank you to everyone who supported this at Thrive and Peninsula Family Service. Thank you to our speakers and panelists, Susan, Nick, Kalimah, and Chief Mulholland, we really appreciate your time today. And thank you, audience, for attending, engaging, chatting, and spending your time with us. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording of the event. And I just, as quick 4 action items for you to process as you take this away. Spend some time maybe thinking about public safety and what that means for you. Keep up this momentum to ensure everyone feels safe. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you all. Never forget to vote and encourage others to vote. And in honor of Kalimah's words, see everyone's humanity. I know that is sometimes difficult to do, but we can all do that. Thank you for everyone's partnership today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.